This is the fourth in a series of 4 classes on issues relating to capitalism and the open market, a halachic perspective. We spent time in the first 3 weeks discussing a whole host of issues, some more broad, some more specific, relating to issues surrounding capitalism and the free market. We began by discussing the notion of property rights and accumulation of wealth, noting how those things aren't frowned upon in Jewish tradition and in halacha. In fact, in some respects, they're actually very much advisable. A person can actualize their divine image with the accumulation of wealth, with the concept of conquering and accumulating and dominating in the sense that we discussed a couple of weeks ago. We spoke about the notion of social welfare, of redistribution of wealth, what that, whether and if so how, that has a place in the halachic system. Last week we discussed a little bit about, or began a discussion, and got pretty much well into a discussion surrounding the idea of competition in the open market. To what extent does halacha encourage, and to what extent does halacha limit the notion of open and free markets and competition in Jewish law? So do we believe in the survival of the fittest? Do we believe in the cream rises to the top? Do we believe in really pure, unadulterated markets, open markets, and that if your product is the best, you will endure, and if your product is not so good, then you won't? And there are all sorts of different factors that come into that. So we began a discussion last week surrounding those things. What we noted then is that the notion that the notion that halacha seeks to advance is one of balance. That on the one hand, to some extent in consonance with what we discussed weeks earlier about private property, how halacha very much encourages private property, and in line with that, if we believe in private property, so we all have a right to cultivate our property in any which way we want, and so long as I have a foothold in where I am in the community, so I can open up a store just like you can open up a store, just like the next person can open up a store. But at the same time, we believe in fairness, and we believe in justice, and we believe in integrity and honesty. And we discussed some various specific cases where, even though letter of the law strictly a person might have a right to be somewhere, nonetheless halacha was very specific. Pasakta li chiyusi. You are literally pillaging my customers. You are literally purging. You're literally taking from my pool of customers. The halacha does recognize, in certain limited, specific, particular types of cases, the idea of yored l'umnas chavero, the idea of kind of helicoptering in and like descending into someone's business and actually taking their customers. So there is, in some respect, as in some semblance, some sort of way, halacha does recognize there is a finite amount of business. There is a finite number of customers, and because the concept of yored l'umnas chavero, of stealing someone's customers, only exists if we actually believe that is even true. Capitalist societies usually don't function that way, where we believe that there is a finite pie, and everyone has a piece of the pie. That's more of a capitalism believes that wealth can grow, and the economy can grow, and GDP can grow, and everything can grow, and there's no pie to speak of in pure unadulterated capitalism. But halacha does recognize that idea, that in certain limited circumstances, that you can say pasakta li chiyusi, you are actually stealing from my wealth. We discussed the case of a mavui, an alleyway where you had an alleyway that's enclosed on 3 sides, and there's only one way to get in. And a person has a store at the end of the alleyway, at the end of the, right near the closed area. And right by the opening, a person opens up another shop, very similar. So you have to pass that store to get to the other store, right? that the halacha said that's something that's not allowed. Because although even if you both have a foothold in that alley, even if you both own property in that alley, even though in theory there's really no difference between me and you, nonetheless, the halacha recognizes that literally what you're doing that's an unethical practice, because you're literally stealing from one person's livelihood by opening up your store, kind of where a person has to pass your store. We noted that practically nowadays, and we'll see another couple of manifestations of this today. We said we would get back to it a little bit. I want to deal mostly today with the fourth element that part of the series, and that is the idea of healing and healthcare. We pointed out last week that that concept of fairness really is what carries the day, and I'd like to, in that spirit, maybe discuss another couple of cases, another couple of points. First of all, we noted last week that in modern times there are very, very few rabbinic courts that will enforce Yored Lomnas Chavero, that will tell a business that you're not allowed to open up because it's unfair competition. It's stealing business from someone else. Why? Because there are a number of factors that exist in modern times that didn't exist then, that kind of alleviate the unethical nature of what's being done. So first of all, the portability of everything. First of all, the portability of people. People can get around. So the idea that there's a finite number of customers that exist, that come to my store, that you are now stealing, doesn't really exist quite like it used to, right? There are 7 kosher pizza shops in Teaneck, right? But I could choose, if I want, to come to the kosher pizza shop in Riverdale, right? So it's not like it used to be where there's a finite number of customers, there's a confined market that you're catering to. The portability of customers kind of dictates that we're now at a stage where that kind of territorialism doesn't really exist quite like it used to. The other thing that exists is the portability of goods, right? Because the pizza shop in Riverdale doesn't just cater to customers in Riverdale, as we just noted. The pizza shop in Riverdale delivers to Manhattan, and it delivers to Westchester, and it delivers to New Jersey, and it delivers all over the place, as does every restaurant, as does every establishment. They cater to everyone. And so the kind of territorial nature of these things that used to exist doesn't exist anymore. And the third thing that we pointed out last week was that that there's a notion of the case we discussed before about the enclosure on 3 sides. Those types of arrangements don't really exist quite like they used to. There isn't really the way the thoroughfares, the way the roads exist nowadays. There really isn't that sort of arrangement where I have to pass this store in order to get to that store. There isn't really kind of that sense that I'm stealing from you, because no way, shape, or form can I not pass your store and see your store and want to go into your store. That sense of deception and almost backhandedness doesn't exist quite like it used to. So all those factors, the open market, the portability, the transportation methods that exist nowadays, all of that kind of leads us to believe that that doesn't exist quite like it used to. You go to any VAD, you go to any local VAD, go to any Beis-Din, right, and they will tell you that cases, Dinei Torah, right, cases that are brought to rabbinic court that have to do with economic competition, with Yored Lomnas Chaver, with Hasagas Gvul, they almost never win. Almost never. And because we don't really subscribe, not that we don't subscribe to the laws, they just don't quite apply, right? The laws always exist. We don't rip pages out of the law book, right? But even though the laws always exist, they might not apply to the particular situation that we find ourselves in, and that's usually how it's been. And that's usually how it looks. Many people think that I live in Bergen County. Many people think that the explosion of Bergen County, Teaneck, Englewood, Bergenfield, all those kind of saturated Jewish communities. Many people think that the reason why they exploded the way they did is because the local rabbinic authorities kind of removed the shackles, if you will, and allowed economic competition to exist the way it has, so that there isn't just one, there always used to be, there isn't just one pizza shop anymore. There isn't just one kosher supermarket anymore. There are a bunch. And so the community spreads, and as the community spreads, so too does the size. So that's kind of how things have looked now. Now, I want to discuss another couple of very interesting particular cases. The first, we're looking at the sheet that has no title. This is another couple of sources pertaining to Yored Lomnas Chavero. After which we will go into the question of healthcare. So let's look at the third source on the page. Okay, the third source on the page is the Shulchan Aruch Oshen Mishpat Siman Kuf Nun Vav Seiv Zayin 156.7. Yesh Omrim, there are those who say, I apologize that these sources don't have translations. When we get to the next section, they will. Yesh Omrim Had B'nei Ha'ir Yecholan Limchos B'nei Ir Acheres Hainu Dafka B'Deleka Pseida Lulakuchos. Right. So the Shulchan Aruch, in the same breath, while validating and almost legitimizing limits on economic competition, does so in a limiting way. He limits it in a limiting way. How so? He says that when is it true that you're not allowed to open up another store? When is it true that we limit economic competition? So long as there is no pseudo lekuchos. There is no monetary loss to customers. Shemochrin kishar b'nei ha'ir. When the store that opens up sells at the same prices and does the same thing, has the same kind of price points as the other people in the city. And also this new market is not, their goods are not of higher quality than everyone else. Aval, however, im nosnin yoser bezol. If the store that opens up sells their goods for a cheaper price, o shahi yoter tova, the goods are better, right? Sha'aznen in halokhin mehen, then the customers benefit greatly from this new store. Ein mochrei ascharos yecholin limchos. Then the owners of the surrounding businesses cannot prevent this individual from opening. Now, the obvious point, pushback. Now, from a price point perspective, that's kind of indisputable, right? In other words, we know what's cheap, we know what's expensive. We know that, right? We have eyes. What's a little bit more ambiguous, however, is quality, especially when you're dealing with things where the quality is subjective, which is why things like a pizza shop, right, are kind of hard to pin down, right? When you're dealing with things like produce, or you're dealing with things like dry goods, where a lot of times the quality, plants and flowers and those sorts of things, where the quality is a little bit more defined, a little bit more objective, then we can speak in these terms. A florist that opens up that just sells better flowers, bigger flowers, nicer flowers, brighter flowers. So like that sort of question. But either way, what the Shulchan Aruch is doing is he's limiting the limits on economic competition. When is it that the inhabitants, the citizens of a particular locale, have a right to force a store not to open up? The conversation can only begin, says the Shulchan Aruch, when the quality is equal. But if the store that's opening up is a better store, if it has better quality, if its prices are cheaper, who are we to say that the local customers shouldn't benefit from having cheaper prices, from having better goods, right? So this is an ode, if you will, to the free market. Shulchan Aruch is, throwing a bone to the free market. While it is important to be ethical, it is important to be virtuous, it's important to be fair, right? Nonetheless, we believe in alleviating the pressure on customers, on consumers. Consumers have a right to pay a cheaper price, right? So, all the markets in the United States that are so overly regulated, a lot of times this is like what people say sometimes. They say like, because of your over-regulation, so I have to pay a hefty price for things that if you would just release the shackles, then I would be able to pay a lower price, and it would alleviate some of the pressure on consumers. I mean, there are obviously more multiple sides to every argument, but that's kind of how the argument goes. Yeah.
So we also have to realize that the Middle Ages, the Jewish lifestyle was very different than it is now.
Yeah.
Many towns had only 50 to 100 Jews in it,
Mm-hmm.
and that could only support one store. So if somebody else comes in, that's a real problem because there's no options.
Right.
So a lot of these laws are written with that sort of flavor in mind. Except for the big cities, the Jewish population in towns was very small, and it couldn't support
multiple establishments.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. And with that, I want to get to, it's a good segue. With that, I want to get to a very, very interesting, and I'll be the first to admit it, I don't fully understand, but very interesting psak by Rav Moshe Feinstein. I understand what he says. I don't fully understand why he says it. And this is a tshuva, the last source on the page. This is a tshuva that was written in 1965. Tavshin Chafhei Yud Adar Rishon. So the anniversary, 1965, so I guess the 50th anniversary of this tshuva just passed a couple weeks ago, right? Yud Adar, 1965. Well, I guess 51st anniversary. So anyway, this tshuva was written. Sometimes he tells you who the tshuva was written to, and to where, not just to whom, but to where it was written. This tshuva, Rav Moshe writes, is anonymous. He says in the first line, he tells you the title. Be'inyan yored lo'umnas chavero. This is a tshuva. This is a responsum, which is about stealing other people's customers, economic competition, and it was written to who? L'Rav Echad, anonymous. He doesn't tell you who he's writing this to. Now we'll see why in just a little bit, because the subject matter is a little bit sensitive. Rav Moshe doesn't want you to know where this issue came up. Okay? He doesn't want you to know. What's the issue? Hinei b'davar hatanot v'hatviot shehaya ben Ruvain im Shimon v'imo Leah. Okay? Regarding a taina, a claim, kind of a complaint. A complaint that Ruvain had against Shimon, right? In the Torah, Ruvain and Shimon are brothers. In classic halachic speak, Ruvain and Shimon are just two random guys. So you have two random guys, Ruvain and Shimon. Ruvain brings a taina with Shimon, okay, and Shimon's mother Leah, with regard to the question of Yored Lumnas Chavera. What's the case? End of the first line. Sheruvain hayalo chanut shel sfarim v'tashmishei kedusha. Ruvain owned a store. What kind of store is it? A Judaica store. A store of Sfarim and Tashmishei Kedusha. A Jewish bookstore and a store of Judaica holy items. Okay? Kiddush cups and Havdalah sets. You know the type. Okay? Riverdale Judaica. Right? Okay? That's what the place is called here? Riverdale Judaica?
Oh, I think so.
Okay.
I don't hear look at the sign anyway.
Okay. When he's owned it since when? Mishnat Tavshin Yud Zayin. From the year Tavshin Yud Zayin, which translates to 1957. So this tshuva is actually written 8 years after that original store opened. Ve'ata, and now, Sachar Shimon Chanut Samuchlo. Shimon is opening a store very close to Ruvain. Ve'rotze gam kein liftoach chanut shel sfarim etashmishei kedusha. Shimon has rented space, okay, nearby, and Shimon also wants to open up a store of Judaica. V'kasher b'shchunatam ein efsharuyot lahachzik shnei chanuyot shel sfarim etashmishei kedusha. In light of the fact, says Rav Moshe, that it is impossible for this particular locale, for this particular neighborhood, to sustain two stores which sell Judaica, which, by the way, he says, was corroborated to me by members of that particular neighborhood, that particular community. That's how I know, says Rav Moshe, that the community is not big enough to be able to sustain two particular stores like this. V'lachein yatsa me'iti eich sheyesh b'zeh ha'isr shel yored lo'umnas chavera. Right, Rav Moshe says, because of this, I have concluded that this is an Isser, this constitutes an Isser of Yored Lomnas Chavera, constitutes an Isser of dipping into, taking from someone else's profession. The Asr l'shimon liftoach chanus b'shchuna zulus farm tashmisha kedusha. Okay? And it is prohibited for Shimon to open a store of this type. That's what Rav Moshe says in 1965. However, he adds the following caveat, which is what I understand what he says. I don't fully understand why he says it or where it comes from. But says Rav Moshe as follows. Listen to this. And in reading this, keep in mind the notion of balance that we were trying to strike, of fairness, but at the same time, competition, right? Of justice, but at the same time, personal property rights. What does Rav Moshe say? Aval, even though Shimon does not have a right to open up the store, Ruvain tzarich l'shalem l'Shimon ma shilem kvar ba'ad hachanut. Ruvain, in preventing Shimon from opening his store, has to pay to Shimon the amount of money that he expended on behalf of that store. V'chein, and furthermore, tzarich l'kabel hachanut haschura lo she'oleh ayin hey dollar l'chodesh. He has to accept upon himself the price of the rent, which was $75 a month back then, okay? Low rent, right? $75 a month in 1965. Uschar ze al meshech shana meshemehayom shayechet l'chanut l'Ruvain v'hu yishalem hamosar lebal hachanut. What must Ruvain do? For the ensuing year, Rav Moshe says, for the ensuing year, he has to incur the cost of the rent for this store that Shimon already brought upon himself. Okay, that's what Rav Moshe says, which is a fascinating concept, because basically what's going on is this, right? Let's just frame the issue. Shimon has rented a store, right? He's already signed the lease agreement. He's on the way to opening the store. Ruvain has a complaint. They come before Rav Moshe, and Rav Moshe says, "This isn't a black and white issue, right? We can't just force the guy to show. We don't want him to stay open because this community can't sustain two stores like this, right? But we can't just shut him down. He already signed the lease agreement. So what do? There's a meeting of the minds. We meet in the middle. Rav Moshe is conceding the fact that the halachos of this particular area are not so black and white. We're going to prevent the guy from opening his store, but you have to chip in, right? You have to recognize and appreciate that this person really hasn't done anything that is per se wrong or illegal. Maybe unethical, not virtuous, maybe slightly unfair, but illegal? No. I have the same right to open a store as you have a right to open a store. We both live in the community. We both want to make a buck. We both want to open a business. Okay? So we can force him to shut down. But Ruvain, you have to pay his rent for a year. You have to help out on this lease agreement. $75 a month. Okay? So now that's what Rav Moshe said. I don't know who wins out here. It's kind of an interesting sort of dynamic. And we'll just read it. Read the last line. The second to last. Well, the last line is his signing off. Yedido Rav Moshe Feinstein. But 2 lines before that, towards the end of the line, after the period. V'danti b'din zeh samchu alai. Why am I right? Rav Moshe says something here which he doesn't usually say. By the way, he says, I am adjudicating this matter because they've decided to ask me the question. Ubau ba'atzmam, and they came on their own, by their own volition, to me, b'ratzon nafsham, hatov lishmoa din Torah, v'chavos da'ati, u'lekabel tzayis, ma sheyetzeh mipila da'ati. They want to know what I think about the matter. That's why I'm offering my opinion. He's a posek. We needed to know that? Oh, by the way, I'm offering my opinion because they asked me, right? When else is a posek offering his opinion? I think what he's trying to do here is he's trying to point out that some of the aspects of this particular psak halacha are extra halachic, right? It's not just about black and white, right? It's so interesting. Rav Moshe, who doesn't, spare an expense to explain his piskei halacha, here doesn't explain anything. He just says he shouldn't do it, but he's got to pay him rent. I think one of the reasons why he doesn't explain anything is because there's really nothing to explain. It's just like his chush, his sense about what's right? So that's kind of what we've been developing over the course of these last few days, just these last few weeks. It's much more about being fair and honest than it is about black and white halacha. As we noted last week, it's not gezela, it's not out and out theft, perhaps, but it's hasagas gvul. It's this more amorphous kind of abstract sort of topic that means don't be a jerk, right? And that's kind of what halacha is trying to project here. I think that's where Moshe is coming from almost in his presentation here. Yeah.
It would be critical to know the size of the community to really understand what he's doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I also think that's one of the reasons why he leaves it open, because
it's not a general rule.
Yeah, he doesn't want us to know where we're talking, because if we did, then maybe we would try to apply it to another case. It's like it's very interesting. This tshuva is very interesting. Yes.
Could it ever be that somebody goes through the motions of opening a store and then he gets a free rent based on this?
Could it be? So actually we skipped a line. We skipped a couple lines, but Rav Moshe puts in some other assurances. He says, and of course it's the case that Shimon is not allowed to open up the store and use it for other purposes. And of course it's the case he's not allowed to sell it to someone else, right? So all of those things are true, right? In other words, all the safeguards that you would think need to be put in to ensure the fairness of what's going on here need to exist there, right? Yeah.
I'm just curious, supposing during that year when one is paying the rent, that store thrives and people like it better.
No.
It didn't open.
It can't open.
Oh, it can't.
Yes. It can't open, but he already signed the lease agreement for the store, okay? So since he signed the lease agreement for the store, the owner of the first store that's already open has to contribute $75 of rent each month, okay? So that's where Rav Moshe kind of ends up. It's a fascinating sort of case and kind of a very interesting meeting of the minds, how he kind of navigates the middle road there. And I just wanted to read it, not because I fully understand it, as I pointed out, I don't really fully understand where it's coming from or why he decided the way he did, but how Rav Moshe is trying to navigate the middle road and be fair. It's about being fair, okay? This is not about black and white halacha, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing with a lot of this, okay? In the time that we have remaining, which is about 25 minutes or so, I'd like to spend a little bit of time discussing the concept of healing and healthcare in halacha. What is healthcare? What right do patients have? What rights do patients have to be healed? What rights do doctors have to heal? Those are questions which are dealt with, quite extensively, certainly in more modern times, as the healthcare industry has exploded, but even in more classical sources. I have for you in source number 1 there. This is an article that was published in Canada, so it's not entirely relevant, but, not that we don't love Canadians, but we're not governed by Canadian law. So the question last summer about the Ebola crisis and whether doctors had a right to deny or to withhold care for Ebola patients because they were putting themselves at risk, right? Doctors in general are duty-bound to provide care when asked to do so. That is, right, most societies have laws of that kind where if a person is in a life-threatening situation, doctors are reasonably with reasonable expectations to provide care. So the question is, would that apply? So, how far-reaching, I think what this sort of frames for us, how far-reaching is a patient's right? Does a patient have an absolute right to health care, right? At what point in halacha, and by extension, though it won't be the discussion in our gathering here today, beyond halacha, in terms of general society, at what point do a patient's rights stop, right? Those are sorts of questions which were dealt with a little bit in halacha, and in order to do that, what we kind of have to do is go back to the source and try and figure out where do these rights come from. And in doing so, we have to figure out two things: the rights of the patient and the rights of the doctor. And the source for all of this, where it comes from, is so interesting because we're, again, as we've been doing every week up until this point, it's about balancing competing values. And I think that's exactly what we're going to see in sources number 2 and afterwards. So if you take a look at source number 2 is in the healthcare world, in the medical world, source number 2 is a very well-known source. Source number 2, although the context is a little bit less important, it also does bear mentioning, and that is that Masechet Bava Kama and the laws of damages, the Talmud is discussing certain payments that a damager has to make to the victim. So if a person damages another person, or person-on-person damages, the person who does the damaging has to pay 5 specific payments. 2 of those 5, okay, we're not going to get into each of the 5 right now. Your children or grandchildren that went through 9th grade here at SAR studied much of this in detail, so you can consult with them. But nonetheless, 2 of those 5 payments are shevet, which is loosely translated as workers' compensation. Okay, the price that I have to pay because you can't work. When I damage you and you can't work as a result, I have to pay you a certain amount of money. Shevet, and another one of the 5 is ripui, which translates as medical bills. Okay, so I have to pay the person that I damaged, among other things, workers' comp and medical bills. Okay, now how is that relevant here? Because the Talmud cites a verse, Rak Shivto Yitain V'Rapo Yirapeh, the verse that is in source number 3, okay, which basically says that if someone who's wounded gets up and is able to walk out, in other words, they didn't die, they're living, then the person is not put to death. In other words, they're not guilty of murder because the person is living, but what they have to do is pay. What do they have to pay? They have to pay sheves, loss of time, shevet from the word Shabbat, right, to rest, right? I am paying because this person is resting, in other words, not working, right? Like we associate Shabbat with not working, right? So I have to pay sheves to this person, and I also have to pay v'rapo yirapeh, and I also have to heal him, right? And the double language, rapo, right, from the word rofeh, refaenu, we say in our Shemona Esrei, rofeh, to heal. V'rapo yirapeh, the double language, the Talmud learns out, based on that double language, the Talmud learns out a certain comparison between shevet and ripui. Whenever you're chayav one, whenever you're obligated to pay one, you're obligated to pay the other. That's the context in which the following comment of the Gemara comes up. Again, I only mentioned it by way of introduction, but it's not really so important for us, because the Gemara says, Ula Rabbanan basroi da'amri kol shechayav b'sheves chayav b'ripui, v'chol she'eno chayav b'sheves eno chayav b'ripui, ripui detana be'kra lamali, right? According to this particular opinion, that appears to have no use for the double language of rapo yirapeh, okay? Why does the Torah mention rapo yirapeh? So the Gemara says, why does the Torah mention the double language of rapo yirapeh? That's the question, okay? And the answer that the Gemara gives is absolutely remarkable. Why does the Torah need the double language of rapo yirapeh? To teach me the following. For the following teaching of the students of Rabbi Yishmael. Ditanya, Devei Rabbi Yishmael Omer, the students of Rabbi Yishmael said, Rapo yirapeh, mikan shenitan reshut l'rofei l'rapod. Right? What do we learn from Rapo yirapeh? We don't just learn that someone who injures someone else has to ensure that they are healed. We learn the concept, or the right, if you will, for healing in the first place. The Torah teaches me with this verse that a doctor has a right to heal a patient. Okay? Now what would you have thought? What? Why would you have thought a doctor doesn't have a right to heal a patient?
Well, it's interesting because I'm the EMT, so one thing we learn is you're assaulting somebody if you don't have their permission.
Okay.
If you put hands on somebody, you actually are assaulting them. So
So,
you have to make sure
very
they have
good.
consent.
So first of all, from an interpersonal perspective, we have to make sure the person has consent, which isn't always possible, right? So that's certainly true. Let's assume, however, for argument's sake, and this is of course an assumption, but let's assume for argument's sake that the person is in a position to accede, to agree to acquiesce to that medical care, okay? So assuming that that's the case, nonetheless, I might still need permission. Why?
we are always talking about God as the
Excellent,
healer
yeah.
of
Yes, yes.
everybody. So why, if I'm a doctor or a nurse or any kind of a healthcare provider, am I going to assume that God is sharing his refuing with
Right.
me and everybody else?
Right. Who's to say that this isn't what's supposed to happen?
Christian Scientists.
Right.
That's it.
Exactly. So therefore, I would have thought, right? I would have thought that what? That a doctor, if someone is sick, right, whether it's with a broken arm or whether they're blind or whether they have heart failure, okay, or cancer or anything, okay, I would have thought that this is what God wants and I have no right to intervene in divine affairs, in the goings on of the world, because this is what God, that's what I would have thought, right? And so the verse needs to come to teach me that what?
Doctors are there for a purpose.
Doctors have a right to heal patients. Yes.
Right or obligation? Word right, isn't it duty?
We're going to get to duty in just a minute. Excellent. Okay? Right now, we're balancing two extremes here. The first thing we have to establish, the Gemara does, the first thing we have to establish is that doctors even have permission to do so. Okay? Right? So we're going to establish in just a bit that we have a duty to heal people. Absolutely. But there are kind of two, we're being tugged in two directions. On the one hand, we actually would have thought that we don't have a right to heal patients. Why? Because God does what God does. And we can even add on to that source number 4. The question and the answer of Tosfot in their commentary here on the Gemara. What's Tosfot's question? Tosfot asks the following interesting question. V'im Tomar, middle of the first line in source number 4. The following question. Couldn't I have learned that out from only one rapo? Why do I need rapo yirapeh? Why do I need the double language? Right? Why do I need that double language? V'yesh lomar, listen to what Tosfot says. This is equally as remarkable. Tosfot says, Dehava amina, I would have thought, Hani mili, when does this apply? Makebi de adam. This applies to a wound or a sickness or an illness that was incurred by someone at the hands of another human being. Aval choli hababi de shamayim, but a sickness that comes about as a result of divine circumstances or divine intervention, okay? A person doesn't, get a brain tumor, at least because someone else gives it to them, right? At least we don't think, Science has not yet progressed to a point where we can definitively conclude what causes tumors, what causes cancer, what causes heart failure. There are things that are that indirectly cause it, right? But I'm sure each of us knows people who, eat unhealthy, and people who don't sleep enough, and people who are under too much stress, and they're totally fine, right? And people who eat totally healthy and are stress-free and get a full night's sleep every night, and they're sick. So the idea that there's a definitive cause to these things, right? There's correlation, there's not necessarily causation. And therefore, those things might be deemed choli haba bidei shamayim. Sicknesses, illnesses, wounds that come about as a result of heaven, because God wills it to happen. I would have thought, an additional havamina, I would have thought that things that come from heaven, that I can't touch. Why? That's what I would have thought, because because when you heal such a sickness, nira kisoter gzeirat hamelech, I am giving off the impression that I'm doing what? I am soter, I am contradicting the decree of God, the decree of the king. Kamash malan, that's why I need the pasuk to teach me this too is not true, right? A doctor has a right, as we're going to see in just a minute, an obligation. A doctor has an obligation, but at the outset we should understand a doctor has a right, humanity has a right to heal the sick. Okay? When someone is sick, we don't believe that things should just happen, right? In fact, in some way, shape, or form, it could be that God wants us to intervene, right? A general school of Jewish thought is, and the Midrashim abound about this sort of thing, that God intentionally created an imperfect world. We read the Midrash in the first week about Brit Milah. right? Where the Roman general approached Rabbi Akiva and said, if God is so perfect, and if the human body is so great, what are you tampering with it for? Leave it as it is, okay? God doesn't want you to do circumcision. If he did, he would have created the human being with a circumcision, right? And what did Rabbi Akiva answer? Rabbi Akiva answers, God wants humanity to partner with God in creating a more perfect world. So there are imperfections which are embedded into society, into humanity, into the world, that it's our responsibility to fix and to perfect and to make better. And this is just one of those examples where it's not just that we have a right, but actually it's what we're supposed to do, right? Yeah.
Another suggestion for the meaning of Rabbi, when there is repetition in the Torah, doesn't it mean to give emphasis? So I'm not just, let's say I have a certain problem and I go to Dr. 1 and whatever problem I've had, Dr. 1 doesn't fix. Isn't it my job to go to Dr. 2, 3, until 10, or until a zillion, to try to find the cure for whatever my problem is,
Sure.
under the Rabbi?
Right. So and we're going to see this in just a minute. The other kind of
Is the duty
factor
of the patient,
is the patient has a duty to live, right?
Uh-huh.
We don't believe in resigning ourselves to a death sentence, right? And that's of course there are a lot of factors involved, and every single situation is different. Everyone should consult with their family and should consult with their rabbi and should consult with all sorts of people who can offer sound and sage advice on these matters. But a person might not necessarily have to, even according to halacha, undergo undue suffering. So those sorts of questions that's also true as well. Nonetheless, so that's kind of what we get from that Gemara, which is a remarkable point. Now, for the duration, what I'd like to do is spend time on the second question. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to discuss about healthcare, about doctors, about patients. There's a lot. There are symposia and think tanks and groups and meetings and all sorts of people medical ethics societies who sit and think about how halacha intersects with medicine. So we're not going to be able in these few minutes to get through everything. But just a number of sources that discuss the opposite question, which is, from where do we know that not only is it because we can all intuit the fact that doctors, humanity, not just doctors, everyone has an obligation to save the life of the person who's sitting next to you if they're in danger. Okay? How do we know that? Where does that come from? So the Rambam says, again, and the context here is very interesting as well. The Rambam is dealing with the following case. It's a Mishnah in Masechet Nidarim, vows, oaths. Okay, let's say I take a vow. Right, this is only simulated. This isn't real. Let's say I take a vow. I vow to never derive benefit from you ever again in my life. Okay, right. So you go with it. Okay, fine. All right. So if I say that I vow never to get benefit from you, that's what halacha calls a mudar hana, right? A person who vows never to derive benefit from somebody. So if I vow never to derive benefit from you, okay, are you allowed to treat me as a patient? Okay? Are you allowed to be my doctor? Okay? What an interesting question. Are you allowed to be my doctor? So the Mishnah in Masechet Nidarim addresses that question, and actually says, yes, you can. Why can you? Because, says the Mishnah, the reason for that is, V'lo nesar, source number 5. This is the Rambam talking in the Perush Mishnayot, the Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah in Nidarim. V'lo nesar ze l'chol atzmo, mipnei shehi mitzvah. Why is it that you can still treat me as your patient? Because it's not that I'm deriving benefit from you. What's going on here? You're doing a mitzvah. Mitzvahs aren't benefit. I mean, they might be indirectly beneficial, but we don't look at mitzvot as things which are inherently about benefit. Okay? So, it's a mitzvah. Kilomar, as if to say, shechayav harofei min hadin l'rafot cholei Yisrael. Right? A doctor is duty-bound to provide healing, right, to his or her fellow Israelites that are sick. Okay? V'harehu bichlal omram, and this is included in this rabbinic statement, befeirush hakasuv, that interpreted the verse, V'hashevo solo. This is so incredible, so inspiring. According to the Rambam, from where do we derive the obligation that a doctor has to heal the sick? From the pasuk that says, V'hashevo solo. The mitzvah to what? To return a lost item to its rightful owner. You have an obligation to return somebody to themselves. You have to.
I'm surprised at that. I would have thought you're returning it to Hashem because that body is not, I mean, we're supposed to, it's not me, my body, isn't it? I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't say it.
And we've made note of that in past weeks, that it is not a Jewish idea that I am the absolute owner of my body, right? That's not a Jewish idea. So, and that's a very relevant, it's relevant in discussions about abortion. It's relevant in discussions about tattoos and other markings that I want to put on my body, right? The idea that it's my body and I can do with it what I wish, right? From an absolute perspective is not really a Jewish idea. That is true. That being the case, right, I am the custodian of my body while I'm on earth, okay? I have an obligation to watch it. And since I am the custodian, when I am the custodian of something and I lose it and it gets found, it needs to be returned to me, right? So I am the address when I am lost. I am the address to return that body, okay? At least during the time that I'm still here on earth, right? So the Rambam says, "V'hashevosel l'rabos es gufa," right? To include even a person's body. She'im ra'ahu oved v'yachol hatzilot, because if you see someone lost and you could save them, harehu matzilo begufo, o b'mamano, o b'yediato. You have to bring to bear your knowledge or your resources or your body, your actual physical body, in order to save somebody who needs saving. All right? The idea of returning lost items is where we derive the source that a person has to heal someone who is sick. Okay? Just a couple of more, and then we'll wrap it up. A couple of more sources from which we derive the idea of healing the sick. And we're not going to have time to get into some of the market-based questions pertaining to healthcare. And this is a class on capitalism and the free market, so maybe we should have just jumped straight to that, but I didn't feel like that was an appropriate discussion without a little bit of a baseline first. So the Ramban says that the source is the verse V'chei achicha imach. Towards the end of Sefer Vayikra, this is source number 6 on the back side, that the pasuk says, the verse says, so that your brother should live with you, right? It's talking about helping out and giving tzedakah to, or helping out your friend who needs help, okay? V'hi mitzvat aseh lahachyoto, right? There's a mitzvah, sheyichye imach. There's a mitzvah that your friend, that your brother, achicha, that your brother lives with you. And you have to ensure that. Shemimena nitztavenu al peacock nephesh b'mitzvat aseh. From this we learn the concept of peacock nephesh, of saving someone else who needs saving. Umikan amru v'chei achicha imach. Zu Darash ben Potiri, the famous machloket between Ben Potiri and Rabbi Akiva, right? And this machloket can spawn hours of discussion, right? Ben Potiri had the following, kind of an obscure rabbi. Ben Potiri asked the following question. Two people are stuck in a desert. There's one flask of water. If one person drinks the flask, they'll live. If they split it amongst the two of them, they'll both die, right? I'm holding the flask. What do I do? Right? So Ben Potiri says, split it, right? Rabbi Akiva says, chayecha v'chaye charecha chayecha kodmin, right? V'chei achicha imach, you have a responsibility to make sure your brother lives, but not at your own expense, right? You have to take care of yourself first, but you also have to make sure that other people live. So it's from the inside out type of thing. But nonetheless, in this context, the Ramban teaches us that we learn, V'chei achicha imach teaches me that I have an obligation to sustain the life of my brother, of my fellow Jew. Okay? Nowadays we would expand that most likely to everybody. but that's for a separate discussion as well. Finally, the last source appears in some of the Baalei Tosfot. Mikanch nitna reshus l'rope l'rapos. This is a Gemara in Brachos, and the Tosfos Rosh, Rav Asher ben Yechiel. The Rosh was a fascinating figure. He started his life in Germany, was forced to flee during the time of the Crusades, okay, and arrived in Spain, in the city of Toledo, where he became the rabbi. So he's a very interesting figure because he spans, during his lifetime, he spans both Ashkenaz and Sfard. So you kind of have this intersection of cultures and of halachic thought in the Rosh. So the Rosh cites one of the French rabbis, Rabbi Yaakov of Orleans, okay, who asked the following question: why do I even write? This is what, excuse me, what's your name? Sorry.
Sonia.
What Sonia asked before, okay? Sonia pointed out that why do I need a verse to teach me that a human being has a right to save someone else? Isn't that obvious, right? So that's exactly what Rav Yaakov of Orleans asked. Pshita, of course you could save another person, right? Lama lo yirapu harofim, haktiv v'ashevosalo, okay? It says v'ashevosalo. Of course, you have to return someone's body to them. Uktiv, and it also says lo tamod al dam reyecha. You are not allowed to stand idly while your friend's blood is being spilled. Okay? So it's another not just a positive prohibition of returning a lost item, or a positive prohibition of sustaining the life of someone, but in addition there is a prohibition. I am not allowed to stand on the sidelines while other people are in danger. Okay? That is a responsibility that I have. And the reason why this is important, just to put a bow on kind of what we've been discussing these last couple of weeks, is all of what we've been discussing, whether it's accumulation of wealth, the concept of charity, the mitzvah of charity and social welfare, competition in the marketplace, healthcare, all of these things are about an appreciation and an awareness of the concept of community, right? I, as an individual, have a responsibility to take care of those around me, okay? All of the laws pertaining to healthcare, just like all the laws pertaining to tzedakah, which we were talking about, focus on the caregiver, not on the patient. It's not about the patient's right to live. It's about my responsibility as a member of society, as a citizen of my community, to upkeep and to care for and to heal where possible and where necessary, and to save the lives of those around me. Whether that's through the mitzvah of tzedakah, whether it's through the mitzvah of arap hoyirape, of providing healing for others. Within reason, I am expected to do so. And you know what? Even when it means sacrificing some of my own. So in the last source, the Tzitz Eliezer talks about, we're not going to read it inside, but you'll look at it on your own. The Tzitz Eliezer will be ending where we began. Aren't doctors putting themselves in harm's way when they go treat contagious diseases, right? Why are they allowed to do that? I'm not allowed to put myself at risk, right? And he answers, it's what doctors do, right? Doctors put themselves at risk. That's what the profession is. And you know what? Even if they refuse to do so, they could be disbarred. Their license could be revoked. Because it's the expectation that you take care of those around you. The idea of community, of drawing a circle around the entire community, is what capitalism and the free market is meant to cultivate. It's not a top-down sort of system where we mandate that you have to do certain things because we want to level the playing field, right? Everyone has a right to health care. Everyone has a right to be healthy. Everyone has a right to go to a hospital and be taken care of because everyone has rights. It's not about rights, right? Halacha believes much more in responsibility. The reason why you as a patient have a right to be healed is because I am your brother. And if I'm your brother, it is my duty, it is my responsibility, my obligation to take care of you. And if you're sick, I take care of you. Because, and we'll really end where we started, it's all about Tselem Elokim. It's all about embodying the divine image within me. Mahu rofei cholim, afani rofei cholim. God is the healer of the sick. God is the ultimate healer of the sick. And therefore I seek to embody the divine image within me and heal those around me as well. So I thank you very much. And look forward to learning together again at some point in the future. Maybe we'll expound on some of these issues. Thank you so much.